I did a video a while ago about, I think it was like my 7th grade history book, and I was talking about how it taught the Civil War in this book.
Dude.
And in the book, it talked about, first off, as a whole section there saying that the problem with slavery in mid 19th century America. And it said, well, on one hand, we had the Northerners who said that slavery should be abolished, and we had abolitionists saying that it was immoral and that it needed to stop. But on the other hand, you had the Southerners who, their entire livelihood depended upon the slave economy. And what were they supposed to do? It's like, what? That's really what it said. It's like, what were they going to do without, and I was like, wow. And then it goes on to talk about the Confederate generals and the Union generals. And for the Union generals, it mentions, I think, McClellan and Grant. And it basically goes through their biography that, they worked here, they went to West Point, they were in the military. Grant left the military to work for his family, came back and joined the Union. What you'd expect, pretty much. For the Confederate generals, though, the Confederate generals, it lists the two main ones were were Lee and Jackson. And they went into great detail saying how these men were strong Christians, that Stonewall Jackson would hold Sunday school lessons with the slave population, how Robert E. Lee actually hated slavery, and they were just doing that. And it's like and once again, this is a Christian school,
yes,
and they were harping that the Confederate generals were Christians. They never mentioned Lee or Grant or McClellan. They didn't mention their religion at all, but they made damn sure that the Confederate generals were the ones serving the Lord. And after it was over, there's a section there that said, when the Civil War ended, a lot of people in Congress had nothing but bitterness toward the South. They wanted to punish them. And it's like, it's the entire thing was just Confederate propaganda. Yeah. And I point this out to people when they wonder how there are so many people who think, oh yeah, naming schools after Robert E. Lee is a great idea. He was a good man. Or why they're so upset when the statues come down. And this isn't just limited to Christian schools. It's really powerful in Christian schools.
Yes.
But that they are actually taught this as kids.
Yeah. And I mean, the book that I had specifically, our curriculum was like a blend of the Becca stuff and a lot from Pensacola Christian College that got filtered in. Teachers just picked. There was no real strong curriculum sense. It was just sort of like, I was like a janitor, 2 years ago, and now I'm a high school teacher.
Yeah.
I might as well just pick the book I prefer. But I remember distinctly that one of my books actually labeled slavery. It hurts me to say this. It's so ridiculous. Slavery as a net positive because those Africans were only brought to the saving knowledge of Christ by their masters.
Yeah.
And with it, literally there's a paragraph that without, black, slaves in the Americas, we would not have gospel music today.
Oh yeah. I remember
wouldn't that be a shame? Wouldn't that be a shame? And it's what else wouldn't have been, would have been a shame? Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah.
The position we're in, man. But yeah, a lot of my curriculum was very Confederate propaganda also, very, very much in that vein, tragically. And it's ridiculous that we're seeing now that it makes sense that a lot of private schools in general only exist as havens for white kids post-segregation. It kind of makes sense that these ideas would kind of bake their way into that.
Yep.
But what's really scary to me now is the push for this stuff to make its way into the public school system, where we will have the outright whitewashing, literally, of American slavery. I can't. It makes me frustrated to talk about. I lose any bit of eloquence that I would normally have talking about this. I just get so worked up.
I get it. I get it, because I intended to make a whole series of TikToks on this. I made 3, maybe 4 videos, and I had to stop because I was getting so angry. Just reading the book, it's these books are just nothing but fascist propaganda. That's all it is. It is a 100% fascist propaganda. There was one, it talked about Martin Luther King's assassination, and it mentioned, it was a Bob Jones book, and the Martin Luther King assassination, and it said that Martin Luther King riled up a lot of tensions with his civil rights
Very
movements,
divisive.
very divisive, and caused a lot of violence. And he ended up becoming a victim of the violence that he started. Like that's what I know. It's just it is brutally bad. And it does go far to explain why we have a society like we have now, because people don't understand. This is something that bothers me. My co-host on the Left Wing show that we do, he's kind of he grew up Catholic, but he wasn't like us. He didn't grow up, steeped in this Christian fundamentalism, this Christian nationalism thing. Is that a lot of these folks, and I'm sure you run across this, where they'll say, those folks that are those fundamentalist preachers or the people ahead of these fundamentalist movements, they don't really believe this stuff. They're only saying this to grant political power. Right? It is so frustrating to me. It's like, no, you don't understand. Yeah. Sure, there are people who are cynically using it. There's plenty of them. But I guarantee you the vast majority believe it is as real to them as the ground they are standing on. They are not fucking with you. Like, they actually do believe this shit.
Yeah. And I mean, for a long time, it was real to me,
Yeah, same.
I can only look back on this with the lens that I have, and really with the anger. It's not just because it exists, but also because I was duped myself. And duped is like a complicated word when we're talking about indoctrination. And I like try really hard, to like have mercy for people, because like you can't know what has been hidden from you intentionally. But that's exactly what this is. Like you raise a child in this environment where they are not allowed to understand how bad slavery was.
Yeah.
In the country they live in the country they are to inherit, you are not allowed to know what the sins of your, forefathers were. It's a step beyond evil, I think. And the fact that like these people are the ones who claim, and we're talking specifically about like the Christian nationalist side of this. These people are the claim to have the only moral authority in existence. There is no such concept as morality without their guidance. Their guiding hand in philosophy, society, history, whatever, is the only way that any of us even have access to this thing called morality. I can't, it's too much sometimes.
It really is. And like the balls they have to, I really to say, oh, actually, sure, atheists can live moral lives, but that's only because you're copying our moral codes. Like, go fuck yourself. I bring this up a lot too, because people will say, because it really bothers me. Like this is more of like a liberal problem. Liberals will say this all the time, that they don't really believe it without knowing that they actually do. Yeah. But they try to have it both ways, where they'll try to say, no, the Bible, it's not just important as a historical document or a social document, the study. Yeah, it is. The Bible, incredibly important to show how people thought over time. There's great literature in it. There's great stories. And yeah, I'm not going to pretend the Bible doesn't have a lot of educational value and culture and social value, but it's a step to go a step further. No, actually, it actually has a lot of value as a source of morality and to craft our society around. And you're like, well, no, that's probably one of the worst decisions you could possibly make. Do you know what's in it? The answer is no, they don't. Like, do you actually know what's in it? They have no fucking clue what's in it. And they'll say something like, well, it says thou shalt not steal. It's like, you don't need to go to the Bible to find that stealing is bad. I guarantee every culture is going to have some sort of rules against stealing. It's not unique. But what I like to ask them is, if the Bible is so great, if like if the foundation for our moral structure and our moral system actually rests with the Bible, why is it that when you go back in time and people take the Bible more seriously, life gets worse for everyone? Because if that's the case, that the Bible is actually like following it is the structure of morality, if you follow it to the letter, as a lot of societies did, life is worse for women, for men, like for children. Like, it's worse for everyone. And the further we get away from the Bible, the happier we get, the longer our lifespan is, the more tolerant and caring and loving we are towards other people, because it seems to be the opposite. And people love having it both ways, and it really annoys me.
Yeah, the adage that I heard growing up a lot, and I feel like this kind of covers a lot of that, is that in this mindset, in this worldview, happiness and human well-being is not the goal. Like, it's a nice feature that maybe sometimes we can have, like, occasionally. It's a perk. But, like, the goal is to glorify God.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter to them. Their answer to that, the cope, is that it doesn't actually matter if life gets worse for women, minorities, even men. You know, like, it doesn't really matter who suffers or who doesn't suffer or whatever, because at the end of the day, this is what God requires of us, and this is what we're going to do. And that's really all that matters. We'll figure, like, that'll all be worked out when we get to the other side. You know, it doesn't matter if your life sucks. It doesn't matter if your, you know, healthcare is not being provided. It doesn't matter if you're literally being enslaved. You know, just cope, hang on, and then God will cover the rest. It's not about us, you know.
It isn't, and it doesn't speak well for the God of the Bible either. I would say that, listen, like, I don't believe a God exists. One might, I don't know. None of us know. But I do know the God of the Bible cannot exist. The God of the Bible, as God is portrayed in both the Old and the New Testament, is a morally, philosophically, and logically impossible being. It cannot possibly.
And it's not even consistent, because the Bible itself is not a monolith. And this is one of the most common misunderstandings, is that when you, especially when we're talking about morality in the Bible, well, whose morals? You know, the morals of Exodus or the morals of Mark? You know, the morals of the Gospel of Luke, or the morals of, you know, pick any Old Testament book. Like, the problem is that, like, it's viewed as one monolithic document, and people take a modern approach while insisting that, like, every, you know, a subjective reading on the Bible is in itself immoral. They will take a sort of subjective view of the Bible and either force it all into coherence or cherry pick until it doesn't matter. But, like, there are parts of the Bible that are increasingly or incredibly moral, like you said. Like, not killing is great, but it doesn't, you know, that can't actually coincide with some of these other things, and it doesn't matter whether it does or doesn't, because they were written by different people in different generations. You know, like, it's not trying to be one thing. It's not even trying to be one thing. We are trying to make it one thing in retrospect.
Yeah, the worst thing that ever happened to the Bible was the doubling down on this modern idea that, oh no, this is literal history, and this is literally God acting these ways, and that the Bible is one, like you said, one monolithic, coherent message. The Bible could not be less coherent. It is just there's the when I'll have to ask about your how you end up leaving the faith, because those stories are always interesting to me too. But when I lost my faith, it was the worst time of my life.
Yes.
I tell people that it felt like I lost a limb. God's existence, like, to a lot of these folks, God's existence is some sort of thought experiment. No, it wasn't like that. Like, God's existence was a metaphysical certitude. God was as real as the ground I was standing on. And so losing my faith and my religion, my purpose for fucking being alive, it was horrible. It was awful. However, you know, you deal with it, get over it. But one thing I did appreciate is that the Bible started making a lot more sense once, because even when in my darkest, my deepest days as a believer, I would struggle with so much shit. It's like, man, I can't square this circle. How is it that the Bible definitely says that God is predestined and foreknows everything, but whosoever will may come, we have free will, completely irreconcilable. God says that morality is absolute, but he rewards Rahab for lying. Just like stuff that just is easily nonsense. It's like, oh, that's right. But why did the Israelites, they are freed from Egypt by capital G God? Okay, like the God of the universe that crafted galaxies. They know about galaxies, but crafted galaxies and held atoms together, the God of everything. And they're going to leave him for a rain god? Why? Why would you do this? This makes no sense at all. It's like, oh, because this is actually a polytheistic culture and monolateralist at best. They chose one God, El Elyon. Oh, that's our God we're going to worship. But there were other gods. There was a Baal. There was a Shira.
Yes.
There was it's like, Yahweh was another one. It's like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. That's why God was so sensitive and why God acted like other gods were real. And it's like, oh, so I will say that it does make the Bible a lot easier to understand when you let go of the shit, hard as it may be.
Yeah. 100%. My interest in the Bible somehow increased after
very
leaving
true.
faith. Right. It meant more to me in a way post the faith, and I still used it as sort of like the, you know, defining document of my life when I was a believer. But now, realizing that it is a story, and realizing the theory of story, and realizing all these other, a cat dad. I love it.
Yes,
Yeah.
Wolfie. He's always annoyed when I'm not paying attention to him, so he comes and bothers me during the show. I gotta
Understood.
give him affection.
But yeah, man, that completely derailed me. I derailed myself.
Sorry.
No, that's my fault.
Your interest in the Bible got higher as you left.
Yes. So coming to understand, how was this story so compelling? What did this story look like across time?
Mm-hmm.
What parts were being added and subtracted, over time? And I consider everything you just said about like the henotheistic, polytheistic society of the early Israelites and stuff. The fact that that's been lost to our culture really is it's just a tragedy of translation, because when you're reading English and you're reading the Lord versus God versus this, that, and the other, Heavenly Father, things like that. It doesn't matter that in the original text, in its original language, a lot of the times those were different characters. Those were actually different characters. In English, they can all just very easily be like, well, it says right here that like this is the Lord and this is the Lord our God, and it's all one person. Like, right? No, it wasn't. Over generations, it's also just understanding that religion is an expression of culture and an expression of geography anyway. Like when the exilic period, when the Israelites were in the exilic period, a lot of stuff got kit bashed together. When, in the post-exilic period, some stuff got left behind with Babylon. Like, people just don't think about it in terms of the history outside of the book. Like we were talking about the Bible as being used as a sort of historic text. For that time period, it is treated amongst Christians as if it were the only historic text. There's nothing else. It's too bad that we don't have anything else from this period but the Bible conveniently. Like, no, the Moabite stone does exist. There is more context here, So my interest in that like only got more intense after I realized that there was a whole world outside of this document that made it much richer as a sort of human story about what we think about the cosmos.
Yes. And it stopped you from saying ridiculous shit. Like
the biggest deal.
Yeah, the story of Noah, it seems to copy a pretty big section of the Epic of Gilgamesh that is definitely older. Like by anyone's any scholar, even Christian scholars, they're like, yeah, well, the real story though is the more recent one. Like the old one, I was like, what? Come on, there's no way you believe this. It doesn't make any sense at all. I would probably say the show is fire. My favorite line so far is that children are not allowed to learn about the past. So ironic when they go on and on about not teaching CRT. Right. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they don't even know what is and isn't being taught.
Yeah. It's and I love the observation about a lack of univocality in the Bible. Should we follow the moral framework of Jehovah, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, Moses, or Paul? I'm ripping that off next family dinner. It's true. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just absolute nonsense. And the thing you mentioned about how the gods were different. This show has been great. Sorry I was late. Red Dead had a long mission. Yo, if there's any reason to miss, I think I speak for Jacob that we will both show deference to either Arthur Morgan or John Marston, whichever one you're playing with. I will gladly show deference to those guys. But I remember like my mind was blown when I found out that Jehovah and so all of God's names like El Shaddai and Elohim and everything, not the same person as Jehovah. No. Mind blown. Mind absolutely blown. I couldn't believe it. And it's just you're right. The Bible, it means so much more to me now. And it meant everything to me back then, but I appreciate it more now.